Welcome to Cooking School with Mama Rowe. I'm your host, Ashley Rowe, and on this episode, we're going to be making taco rice casserole. I found this recipe because I had a friend that got injured, and her injury was an 11-week recovery. Everybody was bringing her so much food the first 2 or 3 weeks that I wanted a recipe that she could freeze and enjoy later when she was still recovering. This recipe is great because it makes 2 pans and, like I said, is easily freezable. Defrost it overnight in the fridge and pop it in the oven for dinner the next day, and you have a wonderful dinner that you had no prep for except for months ago. Stay tuned and we'll show you how to. The ingredients and equipment you will need for this recipe are rice, vegetable stock or broth, salt, black beans, corn, diced tomatoes with green chilies, shredded cheese, taco seasoning, ground turkey, onion, and zucchini. The equipment that you're going to need are 2 9x13 pans, a cheese grater, a strainer, a large nonstick skillet, and a pot with a tight-fitting lid. For this segment, we are going to show you how to cook the rice required for this recipe. We are going to use 2 cups of uncooked rice and 4 cups of liquid. When I cook my rice, I like to use a half and half ratio between water and broth or stock. So I have 2 cups of water in my pot. I'm going to add the vegetable broth that I have on hand today. When you're cooking with turkey, which is poultry, you can also use chicken broth or stock. We're going to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to add the uncooked rice and stir it, and then we're going to adjust the temperature. So we're just going to wait for this all to come to a boil. Our water, as you can see, is now boiling. So it's boiling and it's just continuing to boil, which means rolling boil. We're going to pour in our rice to our water and stock, or water and broth, whichever you have. We're going to just stir it to make sure that all the rice is combined with the water. And then we are going to cover it with our lid, and we're going to turn it down to a medium low heat to where it's called a simmer. So it's still bubbly, but you won't really see it through the rice, but it's not a rolling boil like it was. We're going to set a timer for 15 minutes, and then our rice should be cooked all the way through. Our rice has been cooking for 15 minutes. I have not touched the pot at all. I haven't removed the lid. I haven't stirred it. So we're going to remove the lid, and we're going to go ahead and stir it. I've already turned the burner off to let the heat stop cooking, and we're just going to stir it. And if you'd like to, you can take a taste to make sure it's cooked all the way through, and if it's not to your liking, you can cook it a little longer. But just know that it's going to cook in the oven with this recipe. So if you're cooking rice for a separate recipe and you want it cooked a little more, by all means, that's your call. We're taking a 1 cup measuring cup, and we're scooping 1 cup, and a little bit of a heaping cup, that's okay. And we're going to put it into our pans, 2 cups in each pan. While the rice was cooking, I took nonstick spray. I used the Pam Original, but you can use whichever. You can also just pour some olive oil or oil in the bottom of the pan, take a paper towel, and swish it around before you add the rice. So now that I've added the rice, I'm just going to take my spoon that I used to stir the rice and just put an even layer on the bottom of each of my pans that have about 2 cups of rice in it. Now, I have extra rice left over. I like to cook a little extra. You can back off if you want, or you can have it for a snack to give to your kids, for your dogs, whichever needs to happen in your house. I like to give it to my dog as a treat because she always begs for food. So we're just going to do this to the second pan, an even layer on the bottom, and we'll continue on cooking the ground turkey blend. We have chopped our onion. If you need information or a how-to to get to this step, go ahead and refer back to our spaghetti and meatballs recipe. It's the same dice or chop that we used for our spaghetti sauce. We also need a grated zucchini. So we're going to cut off the ends after we wash it. Just cut off both the ends, and then you're going to take your cheese grater and just put it at an angle and just grate it. Now when you get closer to the end of the zucchini, you're going to need to watch your fingers. When you get closer to the end of the zucchini, you may need to do a flat hand so that you're not getting your fingers into the grater. And just continue to grate as far as you can down the zucchini safely. See, I dropped mine, so we're done with the zucchini, because one, it's on the floor, and two, it was too close to my hand. So now we have our 1 zucchini grated. We've added 1 of our pounds of ground turkey to the pan. I just use a paring knife and cut right into the container or the packaging and just slice it around. I am experienced at this. Please use a cutting board to do this so that you don't slice your hand open or cut off a finger or anything like that. So we're just going to add this to the pan. We are going to break it up a little bit with our wooden spoon or whatever kind of spatula you like to use to cook meat. I prefer a wooden spoon for this recipe. So I'm just going to break this up a little bit, and then we're going to add some salt to the pan, to the meat, to get it seasoned, because this is the only time you have to season it, and you should season as you go. I'm going to take a second and go wash my hands while this browns up before we add salt. We are browning our turkey. You can see that there's still some pink spots and there's a lot of brown spots, so we're just kind of breaking this up as we go along. You can see that there's a lot of liquid in this pan right now, which is okay. It just means that our turkey's putting off a lot of juice. So we're actually going to take a moment before we add our other ingredients to drain this off, because that's a lot of liquid for this recipe that's not called for. We have browned our turkey, added salt and pepper, and we drained off the extra juices. We are now going to add our diced onion and our shredded zucchini and cook this down for just a few minutes to get it a little, get it from the raw stage and to put a little color on it as well. I like to use my bench scraper or the back of my knife or the blade of my knife. The bench scraper just happened to work best today. We're going to stir this around, and like I said, put a little color on it and get it from its raw state just a little bit. Before I started browning the turkey, I went ahead and drained my my black beans and opened my corn and drained it as well, because you don't need the liquid from the canned corn if that's what you're using. So I just put this all in a bowl together to make it easy to dump in and be prepared for that step. I took a moment and I opened my diced tomatoes with green chilies, and we don't need to drain that because all the liquid is going to go straight into the pan with our zucchini, onion, and ground turkey. Our zucchini and onion have softened, and that's the stage that we want them to be in. We have sprinkled our taco seasoning over top, and we're just going to stir it into the mixture and make sure that everything is coated in the taco seasoning. Once it's coated, we're going to add our black beans, our corn, and our diced tomatoes with green chilies. I'm sorry, green chilies, not red chilies, because they're red tomatoes with green chilies. So just going to stir all this together, make sure everything has flavor on it, and then in no particular order, this all needs to be added to the pan. And then our bowl of prepped beans and corn. And then stir all this together to get all the flavor in. And evenly distributed. We have finished cooking our ground beef mixture with all of our yummy goodness in it. I'm using the measuring cup to scoop that mixture into our pans that are prepared with the rice. This is the same measuring cup I used for the rice to only dirty 1 scoop instead of a million. So I'm just going to take a good scoop and just kind of spread it around. And you kind of want to make sure that you're counting, because we're splitting this in 2 pans. So I put 2 scoops in one, and then I'll put 2 scoops in the next. And this just kind of ensures that you're getting an even mixture in both pans and you're not overloading one and not the other. I'm just doing 1 cupful or so at a time into each pan to make sure, like I said, it's evenly distributed. We're almost there. And then I'm going to take my spoon and spread it out just to make sure it looks even. And if it doesn't, if one seems it has more than the other, you can add obviously more to one pan or one side. And there's a lot of juice and liquid in this pan, which is yummy. So make sure you get that incorporated into both pans as well. It smells so good. We are going to top both of our pans with cheese. The recipe calls for handfuls, so it's kind of your discretion. You can use the whole 2 cups of cheese, or you can lightly sprinkle it. However much cheese that your family likes, that is your discretion. So we're just going to sprinkle it over top. You can sprinkle it high, or you can sprinkle it into the pan a little bit, just to get your cleanup. Keep it in the pan instead of on the counter. And we're just going to do this to both pans. And then we're going to preheat our oven to 325. We're going to sprinkle the cheese over both pans. And then there's also a freezing method. So we'll go over how to bake it and also how to freeze it to save for later. We have our 2 pans that we have divided our recipe into. We have one that is completely covered, ready for the oven, and we have a second that is going to go in the freezer. We've only tented this one because we want to make sure that it's cool all the way through and not hot out of the pan to keep the freezer burn down. I've also labeled this with the end of what it is and the instructions on how to thaw and cook and the date that I made it. I've taped this to the top of the foil with packing tape all over it, not just the sides and the edges, just all over it, so that when it defrosts, the water does not let the ink run all over. Our oven is heated to 350 degrees. We're going to take our casserole that we're cooking now and pop that into the oven for 20 minutes. At the 20-minute mark, we're going to remove the foil and let it brown on top, and so it's all cheesy and gooey and bubbly. Welcome to Tip Talk, where we talk tips about taco rice casserole. I like to use a combination of water and broth or stock when cooking my rice. We use vegetable stock in the video, but if you need to use a different broth or stock, please use chicken broth or stock, because we're cooking with poultry in this recipe. I used foil pans because I can freeze one and not lose a pan in my freezer for 6 months, or I can give away my casserole to someone in need, like I did when I first made this recipe, and she doesn't have to worry about returning it to me. She can just throw it away. The recipe called for drained beans. You will also see some recipes that say drained and rinsed beans. This recipe wants you to just drain the beans of the excess juice or the excess liquid that is in the can and leave the flavor on the beans that it was cooked with. To ensure your safety in the kitchen, spray your pans with your cooking spray over the sink or the counter. The sink is better because you're going to wash your dishes with hot soapy water and remove all that grease or the oil off of your sink. Make sure that you do not spray them just standing in the kitchen, just spray in my pan, because you're going to get that extra spray on the floor and you could slip and fall, or someone else could walk in the kitchen not knowing that it's there and slip and fall. So please take safety measures and spray it over your sink. There are multiple ways to cook rice, but the way that we showed you in this episode is the perfect way to cook it for this particular recipe. So please follow the instructions how we cooked the rice in the video for your recipe that you're making for the casserole. On the episode for spaghetti and meatballs, we talked about how to not touch your eyes when you chop onion. Today we cut another onion and we had a very strong smelling onion. We turned on our vent fan, we turned on fans in the kitchen and dining room, And we also lit a lemon-scented candle to help remove that smell as fast as possible so that we don't get watery eyes and are discombobulated for a very long time. So please take steps that you can to ensure that your safety as you're chopping and cooking and removing that smell. Sometimes just turning the fan on high will help. Sometimes putting some lemon out, squeezing lemon over your cutting board or something may help as well. You can look up other things on Google on how to remove that smell quickly from your home. I was handling raw meat today. I didn't actually touch the meat, but the juices may have splashed onto my hands. So I took time to wash my hands to make sure that I'm not putting raw meat juices onto my fresh vegetables. For this recipe, it calls for ground turkey. If you do not like turkey, that's totally fine. You can sub it for ground chicken or even ground beef. Just make sure you watch your fat content on the beef. I also had to remove excess liquid from my ground turkey today. There's a lot of grease and fat that is in that liquid that you can't see until it's cooled. I took one of my empty bean or corn cans and emptied my juice or strained my juice into that can so that my grease does not go down the drain of my sink and clog my sink up later. Thanks for joining us on Tip Talk, and we hope you enjoy this recipe. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Cooking School. We have made taco rice casserole. We hope that you share this tasty recipe with your friends.